Well, come with me on this report because there is a lot of mixed things that I want to talk to you about. As you can see on the screen, 1, 2, 3 and 4 going down, the ecosystem is killed throughout the world. Chemtrail poisons, dead birds and fish everywhere, dissolved oxygen in the water. The scientific reports, the Nile and Euphrates rivers are drying up. There's a snake plague coming. The Swift has autopilot that nobody else can imagine. A bird like this who can actually sleep on the wing. Going further down, you've got Daniel's false doctrines, who wrote the Torah, but then what has happened to the false fake rabbis who wrote the Torah? Now, I want you to come with me on this report because it's a pretty sad state of affairs right across the world. I'm going to show you a map which is going to indicate to you that there's thousands of tons of dead fish, thousands of millions of birds that are dropping out of the sky. I'm going to show you why that is happening, and I'm going to give you a rundown of what we have to do if we're going to do anything to try and save our ecosystem from completely being destroyed by the latest technology. And I will give you a rundown on the latest technology that is causing this. Now here you see a map of the world. There's millions of birds dead up in the USA, Canada area. Millions of birds are dead up there in the Europe area. Hundreds of tons of dead fish. Down the bottom there you've got millions of dead fish, hundreds of tons of dead fish, hundreds of dead whales, thousands of dead dolphins, and including snapper all the way across to New Zealand. Hundreds of tons are dead. Now there you have a picture on your screen of a plane dumping chemtrails in the sky above your head. Now you're looking at, covering hundreds and hundreds of miles, you're looking at a chemtrail that has just been sprayed in the sky right next to the harp clouds which are now forming in a blue sky. This is at about 8 o'clock in the morning in a blue sky, and you will see this spread. I would vouch that by 11 o'clock in the day the whole sky will be covered with a man-made cloud. And there you can see the chemtrail. That would be weigh 70,000 feet up. It's so high that you cannot see the plane. Now, in these pictures of millions of birds that are dropping out of the sky, there's a picture by the Daily Mirror, and some of these other pictures are from various other newspapers around the world, and you can see there that these birds are not wounded. There's no disease on them. They've just dropped out of the sky. Here you've got literally hundreds of tons of fish that have washed up dead on the shore, and there's no answer for this by the scientists. They will not tell you. The scientists will give you a pack of lies and propaganda because they are not permitted to tell you that it's caused by man-made. There's a newspaper item that Nemo, the amphiprion pecula fish, is also next to extinct. Over the ocean, there was literally hundreds of tons of snapper all the way across to New Zealand that were dying and floating on the top of the ocean. There they are again, dead snapper by the hundreds and hundreds of tons. They're a beautiful eating fish, and they're just dying with not a mark on them, no disease. Some more snippets from the newspapers of dead fish, copyright by EPA. And then there were some fish kills in Australia. And I measured some of the water of the fish kills and found that the water was absolutely loaded with nitrite and nitrates, which is the real reason that they died, not lack of oxygen that they said. Now, whilst I'm talking to you about bees, I want to tell you just a little snippet of it, and I'll put the text up so that you can read it yourself. But when they blast the sky in the ionosphere and they destroy the electromagnetic field of the Earth, the electromagnetic field of the Earth is needed by the bees and the migratory birds to tap into, to navigate where to go. And you'll see some of this with the swift bird. But here's a little snippet on the bees, and they just load up with pollen and they can't find their home because they can't tap into the electromagnetic field that's been destroyed by the HARP technology. Now, as I've said to you before in the report, Yahweh, the Creator God, doesn't come down out of the sky and kill everything, but if he has declared a plan to annihilate everything, to destroy everything, then he puts it into the minds of evil, wicked men, people, governments, to do what he wants done to cause the destruction that he has decreed. In a moment or two, I'm going to show you a snippet and a couple of charts on what is called neonicotinoid chemicals. Now, these neonicotinoid chemicals, they are so potent, and when they get onto the flowers in seeds that have them in, or into the water supply, it is having a devastating effect not only on bees, but all the birds, nectar-eating birds, and you will see on this report that they are all being affected by these chemicals. And all I can say to a farmer is, stop buying seed that has these neonicotinoid chemicals in it. The manufacturers will tell the farmer that they'll have a bigger yield, a higher yield, they'll have no weed problem, they'll have no insect problem. Well, that might be right, but it is not the way the Creator God Yahweh made things to be. And all I can say to a farmer is, start buying and start using open pollinated variety of seed. Now have a look at this with me. Now at this moment of time, there's massive lawsuits against the EPA in USA and all other countries that are under the United Nations treaties, all accept the junk science that comes out of these places, that what they're told that they can use, which is safe, is not safe. I'll quickly read a little bit of it for you. Neonicotinoid pesticides are a new class of chemicals that are applied to seeds before planting. This allows the pesticide to be taken up through the plant's vascular system as it grows, where it is expressed then in pollen and nectar. These insecticides are highly toxic to bees because they are systemic, water-soluble and pervasive. They get into the soil and groundwater where they can accumulate and be there for many years, and it presents a long-term toxicity to the hives as well as to other species of wildlife, such as the wattlebirds in Australia, which are dying. Neonicotinoids affect the insect's central nervous system in ways that are cumulative and irreversible. Even minute amounts can have a profound effect over the time. Now realise that broadacre crops such as soya beans, wheat, cotton, corn, etc. have been contaminated with these chemicals. Now when bees carry off this toxin pollen from the broadacre crops and go into the bush flowers, it mixes the pollen with the bush flowers. Now continuing on page 2, neonicotinoid insecticide, they weaken the bee's immune system. Forager bees bring pesticide-laden pollen back to the hive where it's consumed by all of the other bees. Now the EPA have completely ignored all the warnings about this. 6 months later, the bees' immune systems fail and they fall prey to secondary seemingly natural bee infections such as the parasites, mites, viruses, fungi and bacteria. But notice there that I've put Varia beetle mites, and they are running loose in all of the hives here in Australia and causing havoc. Under this attack of toxic chemicals, together with the HARP, the destruction of the Earth's electromagnetic field, and the chemtrail poisons, our wildlife ecosystem and our food supply will ultimately soon be gone. Now, on this next clip, I'm going to explain to you about DO, dissolved oxygen. And if there's no dissolved oxygen in the water supply, that will kill the fish. But if the air, which increases the oxygen supply in the water, is contaminated with poisons, and if the water's been contaminated from the ground level, then you have the result of dead fish. Now, to explain to you why fish are dying all over the ocean, it's hard to imagine what the scientists want to tell you is true, that it's because of pesticides or chemicals. No, it's not. Dissolved oxygen is what we're talking about. And you've got to understand that oxygen gas with any pollutants in it enters the water from above, from the air, from the atmosphere. That is what is getting into the water, and that is what you're going to see from these scientific reports, that is actually killing the fish. To give you a little snippet of more information on it, if you were to take water out of a bore which had no dissolved oxygen in it, and you put it into a bowl and threw your goldfish in it, they would die because there's no dissolved oxygen for them to breathe. Now, I want you to come with me on this part of the report because I'm going to show you some scientific papers. I'm going to show you that this whole details of what the technology is doing, they know about it, and it was published by globalresearch.ca, and I think you'll be able to still go in there and get this information, plus a lot more when you do your own research. So come with me now and have a look at what they are doing, and they know what they are doing. But because the oligarchy, the banking cartel, own and control the media are button-lipped. They are not going to tell you what's going on. And if there's a problem that's millions and millions of birds are dead or hundreds of tons of fish are dead, they're not going to give you the real answers of what has caused their death. Now, have a look at these reports with me. First of all, there was a congressman in the United States Congress, Dennis Kucinich. He tried to stop this electronic, psychotronic information. He tried to stop the high altitude devastation of our ecosystem, but he failed. Now we're talking about here poisoners on the par with arsenic. When you inhale the aluminium, which goes directly into the brain, medical specialists have confirmed that it has an oxidative stress within the brain tissue, leading to the formation of Alzheimer's disease and other neurological diseases and leukemia cancer. It also tells you in this report, more than that, as you can see in this report, HAARP can cause earthquakes. The worst thing that this is causing right across the world, over all of the oceans, and I'll read the bottom part there to you. These engineered carbon molecules, they're so small, 1,000th of the diameter of a human hair. They display bizarre chemical properties and are known to trigger organ damage. A recent study at the Southern Methodist University found that fish that were exposed to one type of these nanoparticles suffered severe brain damage and they died within 48 hours. Now you can see by scientific studies the reason why hundreds and thousands of tons of fish are dead. Now let's talk a little bit about climate change and whether it's CO2 that's causing it. Some time ago, Al Gore went across the world to tell us that carbon CO2, carbon dioxide, is the cause for the terrible climate change. In the beginning, they called it global warming, but they had to change the name to climate change because we are actually all in the world under global cooling, not global warming. It tells you in the top of this report that they can lead to global catastrophes of monumental proportions, including nuclear war and natural disasters, as the whole nations will disappear beneath the encroaching sea,
and survivors will fight for dwindling food, water and energy supplies. It tells you also in this report that they can create abrupt climate change, which includes storm creation and modification, fog and cloud creation, precipitation enhancement, precipitation denial, droughts, inducement of artificial weather, and they can cause at will tsunamis and earthquakes. As we were all taught at school, carbon dioxide is very necessary and it's used in photosynthesis. And in the plant life, it is used up all the time. No matter how much you have in the atmosphere, it is heavier than air, it is down low, and it is used up by the plant life. And the plant life, in turn, give out oxygen for us to breathe. You see, the banking cartel and the New World Order, UN, NATO people, they are all under the same control of the secret societies, and they have cooked up that they need to make you pay carbon tax because they need the funds from carbon tax to fund their evil works and their global government. Now you can see why the media are so quiet about giving you the truth, because the oligarchy, secret societies, in control of NATO, United Nations, World Health Organization, you name it, they don't want you to really know anything about why they are asking countries to pay carbon tax. Now, I don't know whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, or you believe that the God that you particularly worship is the God of creation. But I'm going to show you the connection here to what Yahweh, the Creator God, says. So don't turn this off, because this is a very important part of this report. There's a lot of things that was given to the world through the original Hebrew text of the Old Book. I'm going to give you some of that to have a look at. Then you make up your mind whether or not you can place any credence or credibility in it. And you make up your mind whether or not there is a creative God that's not only in charge of his world, but created everything in his world. Because I'm going to show you some of the creations that he made in this next clip, and you make up your mind just based on common sense. Forget about going back to the pastor or the rabbi, because I'm going to ask you to use your own common sense as to whether or not these beautiful creations that were created in this world were created by the divine hand, because they were perfectly made right from the beginning. And also, Yahweh, the Creator God, was so angry. He has a day of wrath, a day of anger, a day of judgment, that he told the whole world that he's going to dry up the Euphrates River, dry up the Nile River, dry up the Hiddekel or the Tigris River. This is what is in the old book. Now you can say that's just a coincidence. Well, it's up to you what you think when you see this report. Now the old book tells you that the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers are going to dry up and Damascus will be destroyed. And there's some pictures on the screen that you can see from the New York Times. Now, if Iraq and Iran is going to be destroyed, it also tells you that Jerusalem is not only going to be destroyed, but it's reduced to rubble without any inhabitants. Now, the commentaries in the Christian Bibles and the Judaism Jewish Bibles will tell you that that happened way back in the Roman Empire when they came down with Titus about 70 AD. Well, it never ever happened where it reduced it to rubble, and it did not happen so that there was absolutely no inhabitants there. This kind of destruction that the book says is going to be reduced to rubble without any inhabitants. And you can see in this picture from the New York Times, there, as the water is evaporating, there's mounds and mounds and mounds of salt, and there's a poor lady digging down deeper to try and get some water. Now, some time ago, I put out a report
and I entitled it, "Has the Day of the Lord Started?" Well, if you look at this, and this was a report that was put into the newspapers by Patrick Cockburn. An unprecedented fall in the water levels of the Tigris rivers and the Euphrates rivers has left the rural populations at the mercy of heat, drought and displaced wildlife. It's also caused a heavy plague of snakes, which is biting the people and killing the people. And what's more, Yahweh, the Creator God, says in the old book that he would cause a plague of snakes to let them loose over the people who he describes as people that have rejected him, rejected his laws, wicked people. And you can see now on your screen from the newspaper reports how these rivers are destroyed. They're drying up. The fish have gone. The crops along the banks of the Nile have gone. Vegetation planted on the Nile and everything that's planted alongside the Nile will dry up and be no more. That's, you will find, in the old book in Isaiah 19. Is that just a coincidence? It's also in Ezekiel 29. Now, I'll put some of these little clips up for you because in the beginning of this documentary, I asked you to use your own common sense. Most of the world has been taught that God doesn't exist. Most of the schools have hidden a creator God from the children, and most of the world believes in evolution because that's what the secret societies and the oligarchy want you to believe. Now, I rejected that because of some simple questions that you have to ask. For example, I said to a lecturer at the university, I said, would you agree that most of the birds and the fish and the animals are divided into 3 categories? And she said, yeah. I said, well, that's either omnivore, carnivore, or herbivore. And I said, well, okay, you're teaching that by natural selection, all of these creatures evolved over millions of years. Well, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's look at the cockatoo. If you gave the cockatoo a piece of meat to eat, you think it would finally realize that it's food when it's actually a herbivore and it eats seed? I said it would starve to death. In a cage it could live up to 80 years. Out in the wild it'll live 50 years. And these swifts which we are looking at here now, I said, well, they have about a 12-year lifespan. They're not going to live for 1,000,000 years and decide that they've got the ability to navigate 70,000 kilometres around the earth, go back to the same place every year, and stay on the wing to drink, feed, mate and sleep, and then they can come all the way back down to Australia every summer. I said, they've got the ability far greater than our jet aircraft have got. So how do you explain that in natural selection? Did they come from a chook or an emu or an ostrich in your natural selection? They were made perfect for what they are doing. They were made perfect by the Creator in the very first instance of their creation. That is the only answer. Mathematically, it would be impossible to say that these birds that can fly at a level at 115 kilometres an hour, in other words, they would break the speed limit going along the road and on level flight, and they could dive at 180 kilometres per hour. How could that come from natural selection? You'd have to ask the question, and you'd have to come back to common sense says you that it's impossible for it to be what they are out of evolution. Absolutely impossible. Now here's a couple of other beautiful birds, the king parrot and the mountain lory or red rosella. They too live probably 20 to 30 years in the wild, but they too can live up to 80 years in a cage. Now, how could they come into being when they can't live for millions and millions of years? There's no way they could have any natural selection to come from. Ask the question. Use common sense. They had to be created exactly as they are, as you see.
Just a couple more of these beautiful creatures that have been created, and the way they are coloured. If you look at these birds and see the beauty in them, they were perfectly made for what they are in the ecosystem right from the beginning. They too probably get no more than 10 to 15 years lifespan, and then they're dead. They wouldn't last a million years for natural selection. Now look at these beautiful cardinal neons that come from South America. They have to have water about 6.5 pH, and it has to be soft water at a temperature of about 75. It's only got a tiny little heart, 2 to 3 millimeters inside, yet it can pump the blood through this fish for 7 years. Now just use common sense again. How could it come into existence if it wasn't created and made perfect for what it is right there as you see it today? As I said earlier in the report, I would give you some information on fluoride. Today, after 2 referendums in this country when the people said no to fluoride, it didn't stop under United Nations treaties. It didn't stop the governments from pushing it onto the people because they got junk science reports through the United Nations and the World Health Organization, through the CDC, that it was a good product, it was safe to use. Today, the poor people are suffering from knee replacement, hip replacement, pineal gland problems, goiter problems. The children are getting osteosarcoma, and all of these maladies are caused by fluoride. They know that, and yet they force you to drink this terrible poison because they got no other way of destroying it or getting rid of it because it's such a terrible poison. Now, have a look at the chart that I'm going to show you now on the chart from Professor Harold Hodge. Now, I've got to show you a little bit about the fluoride. They will tell you that it's a natural element that comes out of the creeks and the rivers. No, it's not. This is a hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a byproduct out of the fertilizer manufacturing factories. And it's on the screen here for you to look at. It's anthropomorphic, meaning it's man-made. It's a waste product in the smoky stacks of the phosphate fertilizer factories. It's S6 extremely toxic poison. They got no way of getting rid of it, so they're going to make you drink it. That proves that it's a difficult problem for these factories to dispose of. The fluoride poison is banned in Russia, China, and many other countries. Now 5 states in USA has also banned it, and a town, Lismore in North New South Wales, has given people water without fluoride in it. Twice in Australia, as I said before, there's been a referendum. Both times the people said no. Now it came from a junk science report from a Professor Harold Hodge from the Rockefeller-controlled Mullen Institute. It was compiled, the first medical science report, that fluoride was a safe product to assist in the eradication of tooth decay. This fake and false fraudulent report was then sent to all of the medical centers. As I said, sent to all of the medical centres and the dental centres throughout the world. But because it came through the World Health Organization, the CDC, our governments, who are under treaty to the International Health Regulations, blindly accepts this junk science that the product is safe for people to use. And backed up by a puppet media who's only going to print the propaganda that tells you that it's safe and good to use, they've got away with it. But now they've realised that young people, it affects their pineal gland, it affects their neurological systems, it affects their nervous systems, and all of a sudden now people are realising that it's not as good as what they said it was. People with goiter problems, people with hip replacements, knee replacements, and bone marrow cancer. Fluoride is the culprit that is causing it. You know, we've been, well, by now you would realise we've been duped by the pharmaceutical and the drug companies. We've been duped by a puppet media that is not allowed to give you the truth. And we've been duped, deceived by the leaders of all of the Christian churches. And I don't care whether you go to the Seventh-day Adventist or Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or Baptist or Methodist. I don't care who you go to. Those doctrines that you are listening to that have been handed down every day, every week, every month, every year is just a load of nonsense when you compare it yourself to the old book. And that's what I've done. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not a pastor. But surely the truth is in that book. If it was given to the prophets of Yahweh, the Creator God, to give to the world, he put some safety valves in there to make sure that the wicked and the evil people couldn't destroy it before today. So don't go away, I've got some more to show you. Now, I've put this chart up because a lot of people that have been led down blind gullies with doctrines out of the Christian churches in particular, they don't think that Yahweh God would do anything evil. They don't think that Yahweh God would hurt people, destroy people. Well, I'm sorry, all through the whole book, there's hundreds of stories of Yahweh God doing just that. And if you go to Isaiah 45, you'll see that Yahweh made the evil, created the evil. And you go through all the book and you will see he uses evil spirits to carry out his decreed plans of destruction over nations and kings. And there's a lot there for you to do your own research on. Yahweh says, woe to those who think they are wise. He'll show you who's wise. And because of the secret society's control over all the religions, Yahweh has blocked the rabbis and pastors' ears, and he has blinded the church and Jewish leaders, and that is pretty obvious today. But some will be permitted to understand, and you'll see there, Yahweh says, I will let some of them understand. The scribes are false, so they're writing up falsehood, and in 800 BC, Yahweh withdrew from Israel. That's something that you should all know. Now, just to prove this point, when Yahweh the Creator God decrees annihilation and destruction on leaders, on kings, on governments that are wicked, there's an example here in 1 Kings 22 of how this has happened, and you can read it yourself. And also you'll see there in Ezekiel 30, Yahweh's words, I will deliver the land into the hands of evil people, and I will make the land and all that fills it desolate by the hands of foreigners. And as I explained before, evil people cook up the ideas of what they think is right to do, but they are doing exactly what Yahweh has decreed. The same thing again. Young people, babies, are falling sick because they've been given the so-called swine flu injection. And old people, some of the reports that we've got, they've never been so sick in their entire life since they got their injection. So these bad things that are happening, the fish are dying all over the ocean, the birds are dropping out of the sky, these are all things that Yahweh said will happen. Now, you might think that that is part of his day of the Lord. I think it is, because there's never before in the history of this earth has there been such an entire, total destruction of marine life, bird life, animal life across the globe. And the other bad things that are happening with the wars, one war being after another, are all being created in the minds of evil men because they want to take control over the people, over the countries. On that day, certainly on that day, Yahweh has said, and you've just read the words, that he is going to deliver the world into evil people. That has happened for sure. Look at these beautiful creatures. They've been hit hard by the HAARP and the nanoparticles of microscopic polymers in the chemtrail.
and there's thousands of them dying. Beautiful creatures, not a mark on them, no disease. They only take 48 hours, as you've read in this report. Only 48 hours for their brain to be destroyed by the pollutants that is in the air that they breathe. Now, as I've shown you on this report, how the bees will pick up polluted pollen out of broadacre crops, they will carry this into the bush. It will end up in the natural flowers of the natural bush, and the honey eaters are dying by the hundreds. Now, if you wind the clock back to the 1700s and the early 1800s, get the books that were printed by Darby and Brown, and also that was published by Bishop Newton, and also that were published by Westcott and Hort. You will find that the commentaries that were handed into all of the Christian churches and the Jewish people in their Tanakh, their commentaries are the same. All of these types of conclusions, interpretations of Daniel prophecy are all much the same. There's not much difference between them. And I put this up because I've put the image up that was supplied by the Seventh-day Adventist Church in a place called Casino in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, Australia, because they were holding public meetings to explain what they were taught to explain 150 years ago. And if you were to look into the commentaries of all of the Bibles, the Christian Bibles and the Tanakh of the Jews, you will find that it's all very much the same. There's not much difference between what they offer. But this prophecy of Daniel 2 is all about Yahweh, the Creator God, bringing in his eternal kingdom. He's represented in this prophecy by a stone that smashes the image in one event. It is not about one nation conquering another nation, conquering another nation. It's all about their culture, their religion, which is wiped out and conquered by Yahweh, the Creator God. As you will see when I put this image up on the screen for you, read the notations and you will get a proper understanding of what this prophecy is all about. Now here you're looking at on your screen an image of the Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And there's the image, a giant image, which has been pumped up and on display. It was supplied, as I've said before, by the SDA Church in Casino. Now, if you look up at the top and look at the notes with me, it does tell you in Daniel 2, verse 28, that is what will happen at the end of days. Then it goes down in the image and it says, well, you've got the head of God, which is Babylon. That's the culture and the idols. Then you've got Medo-Persia. Again, that's the idols. That's the culture. That's the religion. Then you come down to Greece, and again, you've got the Grecian idols, the culture, the religion. And, of course, then you've got Rome and so on. But it tells you that all of these kingdoms are smashed to smithereen by one event, represented by the stone that hits this image, and the stone represents the everlasting eternal kingdom of Yahweh, the Creator God, and you'll get that in verse 44. So you go back and do your homework on this and you realize what is going to happen, and realize this is published in the Northern Star newspaper. This is where we got the image. Now, as I've already said in 2 or 3 reports, we've been thoroughly duped by mainstream religions and governments. I've put these details up for you on the screen so that you could do your own research. My question was, who wrote the Torah or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible? Who put the canon together? And I got some astonishing results. Some of them I've put up here for you to look at. In item 1, it tells you there that the minyan, that's 10 rabbis, they wrote the Tanakh and the Bible and the Targums. We're talking about 550 BC to 150 AD. And they are the Pharisees. They were in control of the Sanhedrin, which is terminated. But that Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, is the pre-runner of today's rabbinical movement. Item 2, it tells you something there that I took notice of. It says, through Akiva's work, many important ceremonial sacrificial laws are in that item. Well, I'll tell you something which I'll show after you have a look at this. I'll show you the statements that were made by Yahweh, the Creator God, where he clearly says, I gave absolutely no commands, no instructions for them to kill any sin sacrifice. Now, that would include the story of Abraham being told to kill his son Isaac. Why? Because, you see, the commentaries will tell you that Abraham had to be tested. Well, I'm sorry about that. Yahweh knows the end from the beginning, and he would not have asked Abraham to kill his son just to test him to see if he was loyal and faithful or not. Have a look furthermore on these ones here, and you'll see that in item 5, it even has the hide and audacity to say that they've discovered things that were even unknown to Moses. In item 6, you'll see the Deuteronomy was authored by Moshe ben Maimon, also known as Rambam. And the Mishnah Torah of Deuteronomy was compiled in the year 1170 to 1180. So when you read more of this, you'll realize that the first 5 books of the Bible, they weren't written by Moses. Yes, there would have been some details there that Moses was given by Yahweh, the Creator God, when he was up in Mount Horeb. But there's a lot more to who wrote the Torah, because that has been a deception over the people for 2,000 years. There's one more vitally important thing. When you go in and you do your research on this, you will find that most commentaries, most scholars will say that these books were put together in the 4th or the 5th century. Now, if that be the case, we're talking about the Jews that were exiled out of Jerusalem by the hand of Yahweh God because they were so wicked that Yahweh said, don't take any notice of them. They speak in my name, but I did not send them. Don't take any notice of them. These are the people that went to Babylon, and they cooked up the Talmud, and they cooked up the oral law, which is the falsehood that Yahweh said, I did not command them. These words are not my words. They claim they're my words, but they are not my words. So when you understand this from my previous report, you will come to the knowledge of realizing somebody else has put these together. Now, with the Sanhedrin and the Minyan, I've put up on your screen so that you can see who they were. They were all executed, including Rabbi Akiva, as you can see there. A couple of these fellas, they had the skin pulled off them while they were alive, and then they were burnt at the stake. So you can see Yahweh, the Creator God, was not looking after these people who think they were still his chosen people. No way in the wide world. And when you look at this, I'll leave it on the screen for a minute or two, and you read the notes of it, you can see exactly what happened to these Jews. Over 500,000 Jews, by the way, were slaughtered when they came back from Babylon to build a second temple. That is another deception that I'll cover in another report. Now, earlier in this report, I promised you I would give you some details of what Yahweh, the Creator God, did say and did instruct and commanded through his prophets, not through the fathers or the forefathers, which would be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not through Moses during the 40-year sojourn out of Egypt. They're on the screen now. I'll leave it there for a couple of minutes, items 1 through to 8. But in particular, approximately 840 BC, in Hosea chapter 8, Yahweh says he does not accept their sacrifices. In item 2, 840 BC, in Hosea 9, he says, through the prophet, let not these sacrifices come to the temple. In item 3, approximately 780 BC, Amos 5, he makes a statement quite clear. Did you have to bring sacrifices and meal offerings to me for the 40 years sojourn in the wilderness? And of course the answer is no. He gave them no instructions whatsoever. And you'll get that also in Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 21 on. In item 4, 750 BC approximately, he tells Isaiah, bring your worthless meal offerings, sacrifice offerings, no longer. It is an incense of an abomination to me. And then you've got in item 5, about 600 BC, Jeremiah 6, your sacrifices are not acceptable to me. In item 6 to Jeremiah 7, he says, Yahweh speaking, I did not command them, that's the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, on the day, or Moses, on the day that I took them out of Egypt, concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. I spake not unto your forefathers, nor did I command them. Now that would also include Abraham concerning Isaac. So picking up on Yahweh's words, to the forefathers, and the forefathers are none other than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he makes the statement quite clear, nor did I command them concerning sacrifices. So who put the whole story in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, in the first 5 books? Who put the story in there that Yahweh told Abraham to kill his son Isaac as a test run for his loyalty? That is not true unless Yahweh tells lies. Well, I don't believe Yahweh put all of these statements as lies. I believe the lies came in through the Jews, through the Sanhedrin, through those who were speaking falsehood that went back to Babylon. I believe that's where these lies came from, not according to these statements. Yahweh made it quite clear. He did not command them for blood sin sacrifices. When you realize that all of the nations around them, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Rome, all of the nations around them were into blood sin sacrifices. And it's obvious that these people picked up that idea from the nations around them, because Yahweh makes it quite clear. He says, I didn't command them. And then when you look at the commentaries in the Talmud by the Jews, they make the outlandish, audacious statement that Yahweh permitted it so that they could get used to the idea, because they would not be able to jump out of their idol worship in one jump into worshipping just Yahweh. What an outlandish statement to be made in the Talmud. And as you can see there, they were burning their sons and their daughters. And if you go further into that subject and you look at Ezekiel, I think 16, 17, 18, you'll see that they were killing their sons and daughters as blood sin sacrifices to idols. It is no wonder that Yahweh, the Creator God, rejected Israel and Judah because of their wickedness. If you go into Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 26 through 31, and chapter 16 through to verse 36, you will see, again, more details on how they were taking their sons and their daughters and they were killing them, sacrificing them, burning them as a sacrificial offering to idols. There's no wonder these evil people were totally rejected by Yahweh, the Creator God. And as I've said in the previous reports, Yahweh, the Creator God, chooses a new group, a new lot of people. They're not liars, they're not cheats, they're not criminals, and they will be the Israel that will be chosen and redeemed to be his people at the end of days. And just to finish up, so that you realize that the Talmud, the oral law, the Mishnah, is all an abomination and a falsehood to Yahweh, Creator God. He makes it very clear in Deuteronomy chapter 4, do not add to his words. He has given all his words, and do not add to them. And that, of course, also includes the New Testament, which came along in the time of Justinian. That is added words to Yahweh's words, and that is also an abomination to Yahweh. Do not listen to these words. Now, one of the safety valves that Yahweh God put into the words in the Bibles is the fact that you can read a chapter on the future events, the prophecy, but in the same chapter, a few words further on, you'll see that he's saying that he's going to annihilate and destroy Israel, destroy Judah, because they are so wicked. And that is the reason why it has been allowed to, or permitted to go through the hands of so many wicked, evil Jewish people over the last couple of thousand years. But if you read this chart, it'll explain to you that the word Israel, owned by Yahweh, is given to a new group that is chosen by Yahweh, but the new group still keeps the same name, and that will be Israel. And then this has happened because the wicked Israel, the bad Israel, the ones that have been rejected, Judah and Israel totally rejected, they are not the people that are going to be redeemed or brought back to the land of Israel. So look at this chart, it will help you understand, and then you will realize that all of the guarantees, all of the covenants, all of the agreements that Yahweh gave to the world will be upheld. Yahweh does not go back on his word, and Yahweh is not a liar. Now this is just to give you a preview, a little snippet of the next report. But in particular, you need to know that there with chapter 7 of the Daniel prophecy, it tells you in that chapter that the oligarchy, New World Order, United Nations, that is destroyed by the hand of Yahweh. That also is destroyed by the hand of Yahweh, and that is in chapter 8 of Daniel. But be suffice to know now that the government's going to change the laws, and that is the 10 Commandment laws being thrown away, and the 7 Noahide laws will take over. That's already been accepted by Congress in the United States and the United Nations. You will see on this chart on the screen now that the governments are being secretly changed to be corporations. That allows the New World Order, that allows NATO to come in, that allows the IMF to come in and take over your country without being subservient to the constitutional conditions. And they are doing this secretly right now. Most of the countries have been taken over already.